Veteran police officer Gilbert rolled onto the scene of what was to be the darkest thing to happen in a rural town in Kansas. Accompanied by Gilbert was Officer Gonzalez, a recruit stretching their legs for the first time. "Quite the call today, Rook. It may be the worst of my career," Gilbert stated, while focused on pulling into the long driveway of the crime scene. Police cars filled the lot, more than Gilbert had ever seen in one area of this quaint little town. Gonzalez was uncomfortable. His father had been an officer in Detroit. His father had seen many things in his life, and his father was also diagnosed with PTSD. Gonzalez's father had told him to not become an officer, but it was his dream since he was a child. When he moved out to this town, he figured he could fulfill his lifelong dream, while honoring his father's final wishes to not become the closed-off shell of a man he had been. While getting out of the car, Gonzalez was shell-shocked. The house was large. Placed on a huge field of corn, this farmland was clearly the work of generations. But what shook Gonzalez was the giant bay window centered in front of the home. It was blood red, splattered with what he could only assume was human remains. When walking inside, he was quickly pulled back by Gilbert. "Look where you step, Rook. The scene is very fragile." Gonzalez looked down to see drag marks going towards the living room of the house, where the bay windows were. Once inside, carefully stepping past the lines of smeared blood, Gonzalez had to hold back his vomit. The living room had blood splatters on the ceiling, all over the furniture, and even worse were the remains of those who once lived there. As detectives analyzed the scene, he could overhear their conversation. "Looks like we have 3 victims. The husband was shot in the head, it seems, as behind him there appears to be a bullet hole in the bay window. Looks like after he was shot, whomever shot him repeatedly bashed his skull in." Gonzalez looked down to what he could only explain as a mangled silhouette of a human. All of his limbs were completely bashed in, as if the killer had such a sense of overkill they could not help themselves. Gonzalez then looked to the couch and almost fell to his knees. There lay a child, with the same fate as the husband, the poor little body just as mangled. Gonzalez almost quit right on the spot, but Officer Gilbert could sense his loss of innocence in that moment. "I know this is a horrible sight to see, son. In my years, I have seen many things, and although this may top most of them, you can help us make sure this never happens to another child again." At that, Gonzalez regained his strength, knowing that he can make a difference in the next potential victim's life. Scanning the room, there was one more victim in this ordeal. A woman lay on the ground, her eyes blown out of her skull, but she had no other damage on her. She was covered in blood. "Why was she spared?" Gonzalez asked one of the crime scene investigators. The investigator looked at her, then back at Gonzalez. "From what I gather, it may have been pity, but what I can't understand is why it looks like her eyes were blown out from the inside of her head. And then there's that." The investigator then pointed at the woman's feet. There lay a cardboard box. It looked as if it was once tied by rope, however the rope was unbound. There was something peculiar about this box. It was clean, like unnaturally clean. In a room covered with blood, this box looked relatively untouched. One of the investigators picked it up and looked inside, his thick latex gloves rubbing against the rope to see that it was adhered to the side of the box, as if it was not meant to be opened. When peering inside, there was nothing. Gilbert was puzzled, but figured it may have been a signature from the killer. What it meant, nobody knew, but they bagged the box, as many other things from the scene. Next to the box was a fire poker from the fireplace. The strong metal, almost dented, covered in every form of human viscera imaginable. Gonzalez stated, "Looks like that may have been the weapon." The investigators agreed, as it looked like the striations on the victims had many straight indentations. Gilbert stated, "You boys keep up the good work. I need a smoke and to think about what I have just seen." The investigators tipped their hats to Gilbert and Gonzalez as they walked out of the house. While walking out of the house, Gilbert said, "Rook, I know this must be too much to handle for you, as it is for me. Let's go back to base with what we have bagged, and start combing over what we know to generate some leads." Gonzalez had no qualms. He was just as ready to get out of there. Once at base, Gilbert and Gonzalez unloaded all they had collected. After a few hours of deliberation, they had both decided that they did not have enough to go on with their level of expertise. As they did not have any DNA analysis completed yet, it seemed that their best bet was to get some rest and work hard in the morning to combat whatever was going on here. Gilbert gave Gonzalez a ride home. They both went to grab a bite to eat, but it seems that their appetite was gone, for quite obvious reasons. As Gonzalez and Gilbert made their way through the dark woods on their way to Gonzalez's home, Gonzalez had memories of just a few years ago. He had just proposed to his now wife. As their wedding was approaching, his father had come down with a rare form of leukemia, and on his deathbed, he knew his son was in school to become an investigator. But he warned his son to turn away if it started to damage his soul. After he passed, Gonzalez, his new wife, and his mother moved out to Kansas to start a life in a much safer place to be a cop. When getting out of the car at Gonzalez's home, Gilbert got out to shake Gonzalez's hand. Gilbert was a tall, strong man. Lines of gray speckled his hair. Gonzalez was of the newer generation, one that was not built for such high levels of disaster as they had seen this very day. Instead of shaking Gilbert's hand, he hugged him. At first, Gilbert did not embrace him, but he too had seen too much for one to see in his life, so he hugged Gonzalez back and said, "That's enough, Snowflake." Gonzalez laughed, but then noticed in the back of the car, the box was still in the back seat. "Oh crap," Gonzalez stated. "What?" Gilbert said. Gonzalez then said, "We forgot to bring the box inside earlier." As he stated this, Gonzalez went to grab the box. "I think we should put it in the trunk, to make sure we don't damage it." "Good idea, rookie," Gilbert said. Gonzalez went and grabbed the box. When he did, he noticed the bag had become torn, most likely from the many items that they had taken out of the car earlier. Touching the box, Gonzalez was beside himself. "Oh shit, I'm so sorry, Gilbert. I think I touched it." "Don't worry," Gilbert stated. "The car has cameras in it. We know where you touched it. These things happen." Relieved, Gonzalez proceeded to put the box inside of the trunk. Gilbert waved to Gonzalez as he went inside his home. Upon entering his home, Gonzalez was relieved to be in a place that he felt safe in. Walking inside, he looked to his left, put his keys down next to his father's picture and urn. He picked up the picture and almost cried, knowing that he already was understanding his father's pain for so many years. He gently caressed the urn. Speaking softly, he said, "I will make sure to do you proud. This bastard will get caught." Gonzalez then proceeded to the right. His mother was in the living room as he ventured inside. He kissed her gently on the cheek and said, "Ma, it's late. You should head to bed." She did not respond. After his father died, she had come down with a case of dementia. It seemed as if it progressed over the years, violently. Gonzalez sighed and turned off the TV, covered his mother in a blanket, and reclined her chair. "Good night, Ma," he stated. "Good night, Earl," she said. Gonzalez almost cried when he had heard that. That was his father's name. As a good son, he responded, "Good night, dear," as his father would have. He walked upstairs to see his wife was asleep. Next to her, a bucket, as she had been having some serious morning sickness ever since becoming pregnant. He cleaned the bucket and put it back next to his wife. Trying to not wake her, and still in uniform, he climbed into bed. Between the mental and physical anguishes of the day, he just wanted to rest. As he slept, he kept dreaming of the crime scene, the sight of the box in the middle of the room constantly flashing across his mind. He awoke in the middle of the night in a panic, but quickly calmed himself so he could get some sleep for the long day to come. The very next day at the station, the police chief called a meeting. While addressing and breaking down the news of the day before, he had a harsh tone to his voice. Near the end of the meeting, he said, "We are not sure why, but the patrol car registered to Gibson is gone. This is not like him, so we went to his house this morning. We did not see a sign of him there." The lab tech then stated, "Last night Gibson said he was going to drive Gonzalez home." "Perry," Chief stated. Officer Perry, the other vet of the department, said, "Yes, sir." The chief then said, "Please go to Gonzalez's home to see if you can get to the bottom of this." "You got it, sir," Perry replied. Meanwhile, Gonzalez awoke from his slumber. He was exhausted from the various nightmares, and he awoke groggy. His wife still next to him in bed, he quietly got out of bed. Trying not to make noise, he immediately walked out of the room. He walked downstairs to make a pot of coffee and start his day right. That's when he saw in the middle of the room, on the table, was the box. The very same one from the crime scene. Gonzalez stared at it, puzzled for a moment, before he noticed that his feet felt as if his skin was stiff. He peered down to see he was covered in dried blood. At first panicked, he started hyperventilating. "I have to be dreaming," he said to himself. He pinched his arm, but it hurt. He tried to wake himself, but he slowly realized he may be awake. Freaking out, he ran for the front door to see if the world around him seemed as real as it should. When he was walking outside, he noticed the patrol car was still there. Puzzled, he then said, "Now I know I'm dreaming." He walked up to the patrol car. The trunk was open on the old Crown Vic, and he peered around the corner of the car. He saw Gilbert was bent over looking into the trunk. He assumed Gilbert may have been there to pick him up if this really wasn't a dream. "Gilbert!" Gonzalez screamed, but there was no response. As he approached the car, he noticed something horrible. There was a puddle of blood at Gilbert's feet, and Gilbert was covered in blood. So was the roof of the open trunk. It looked as if someone had slammed it upon him so many times that it looked like he was cut in half. Freaking out, Gonzalez ran back inside. Looking to the left, he saw his father's picture on the floor, crushed as if someone had thrown it on the ground and then stepped on it. His father's urn was missing. He quickly ran over to the sofa where his mother lay, completely decimated, with his father's urn sticking halfway out of her demolished face. Gonzalez screamed, half believing this to be a dream that was fostered by what he had seen the day prior. He ran upstairs, screaming his wife's name, "Eliza! Eliza!" When he reached the room, he expected to see his fearful wife sitting up in bed, but there she was, still lying down. He rushed to her side. When he saw it, the sheets, the bed, the blanket was covered in blood. He pulled the blankets off of her to find that her stomach had been hit so many times it looked as if it was caved in. Gonzalez was beside himself. Falling to the floor, he lay there crying, screaming, and not knowing what to do next. That's when he heard a siren outside, followed by the police intercom. "Gonzalez, are you in there?" Officer Perry's worried voice relayed over the loudspeaker. Gonzalez did not know what to do. As time went on, everything felt more and more real. That's when it clicked. He had touched the box. He had gone to the trunk with Gilbert. He had picked up his father's photo. He had touched his father's urn. He had tucked his mother in, and he had cleaned up after his wife. Slowly, he tried to make sense of the situation. He pulled up the doorbell camera that he had installed outside of his house. He then saw when he and Gilbert had pulled into the driveway, watching himself grab the box out of the patrol car. After that, he saw himself and Gilbert approach the trunk, where he slammed the trunk repeatedly on Gilbert, as Gilbert peered inside of the trunk. Frantic, he pulled up the nanny camera that he had watching over his mother. He watched as he walked inside, threw the picture of his father to the ground, and watched as he picked up his father's urn and proceeded to beat his mother to death with it. Gonzalez cried as he pulled up the third and final camera, the baby camera that he had set up in his room in preparation for his future child. He watched as he walked into the room and proceeded to continuously beat his wife with the bedside bucket over and over again. It all made sense. The second he touched the box, it was as if he was a different person. It was the box, the very same box that he had found at the crime scene. He felt as if it may have something to do with all that is going on. Gonzalez then asked himself, why? Why was the investigator not put into a trance-like state, as he was? Why was he not thrown into a fit of rage when he had touched the box? Gonzalez then remembered nobody had touched the box with their bare hands, except for him. Gonzalez, then rushing downstairs frantically and out of his mind, threw gloves on and grabbed the box with his now protected hands. Gonzalez then ran outside with the box. Perry yelled, "What the hell is going on?" "I don't know," Gonzalez yelled back, clenching the box tight. "Stay there," Perry stated, while growing increasingly nervous as he drew his gun. "It's the box. It's all been the box," Gonzalez said. "What the hell are you talking about?" Perry stated, confused. Gonzalez replied while lifting the box into the air, "I need to destroy it. I need to make sure." That's when Gonzalez felt moisture pouring down his face, as if he was crying, but he wasn't. He felt his face under his eyes, raising his hand in front of him. It was blood. He screamed as he once again raised the box to the sky. Feeling immense pressure, his eyes then burst straight out of his head. I would like to say thank you if you did reach the end of the story. I do very much enjoy writing and reading these, and I apologize that it's been a very long time since my last upload. With a family and trying to support them, I rarely find the time to be able to do this, and I would love to be able to do this every day if I was able to do so. So your like and your shares and especially your comments mean the world to me, and one day hopefully they help me propel myself to the level where I can do this on a daily basis.